watching Blue Dog Aquatics. Now, today we're going to talk about something that we really haven't covered in this channel. That's the differences between freshwater and saltwater and which one's better. So make sure to tune in to the end so that you guys can help us decide which one is better. Now, as you guys know, I'm no stranger to both saltwater and freshwater. These are our saltwater tanks here. And then over here you can see we have freshwater galore. So what makes up the difference? What is the difference? Which one is more cost effective? Well, we're going to figure that out here. So let's start off with tank size. Now, as we all know, the bigger the tank, the easier the parameters are. But there's a lot that goes into an aquarium. So the smaller it goes, the more tricky and more the water parameters fluctuate. Now, as you can see, these are 10-gallon tanks. These are doing awesome. And there's not a lot of upkeep with them. Now, clearly we have a beta in here and he's doing just fine. We have CO2 plants, the Monte Carlos, in a 10-gallon tank, and they're doing awesome. Now, if you were to do the same thing with a saltwater and put that in a very small tank, there's a lot more to watch when it comes to saltwater. You have to watch the phosphates, the nitrates, the ammonia. Then if you have coral or if you have specialty fish, you have to watch to make sure that those parameters don't get out of whack. Now, I'm not saying that the same can't be said for freshwater. You could have freshwater shrimp. Depending on the species of freshwater shrimp, they are very sensitive, and so you need to be careful. And obviously, the bigger the tank, the more easy it's going to be to accommodate their parameters. Same with saltwater. So I think as far as tank size, we can all agree that it's going to be a tie because they're both going to be challenging no matter what size tank. So if you do a small tank, no matter if it's freshwater or saltwater, it's going to be challenging. If you do a large tank of saltwater or freshwater, it's going to be easier because the parameters aren't going to fluctuate. And when you get into bigger tanks, you're going to have sumps on both of them. So it's not going to make much of a difference. Now, let's talk about substrate. Now, obviously in a saltwater tank, we have live sand here. We have live rock. We have extra filtration, that can add up in cost. But so can a freshwater tank, but not to the extent. In freshwater tanks, we have sand, we have fluvial stratum, we have gravel. That is going to be a fraction of the cost of a saltwater tank. Saltwaters need very specific setups. They need the specific water parameters they need, which is a case in itself. I think honestly that saltwater is more challenging when it comes to setup than freshwater. Now, with freshwater tanks, we recommend cycling them for 4 to 6 weeks. And if you don't know what cycling is, that is allowing the tank to go through its natural cycle process of bacteria, ammonia, and nitrates. Now, 4 to 6 weeks on a freshwater tank. Now, on a saltwater tank, you're looking 10 to 12 weeks. Now, you can use TurboStar, and we have shown in the past that you can. I've never used TurboStar on a saltwater tank before. So let me know down in the comments if you have before. But we have used it for freshwater. There were things that we didn't know about it, but we still recommend going the easiest way and just letting your tank cycle. Now, and I have to give it is to freshwater as far as overall ease of setup, ease of the cost effective when it comes to the rock, the substrate is going to be far cheaper than live gravel here, live rock. I mean, when we bought this rock here, it was, oh man, I think it was almost $500 for like 40 pounds. It was insane. I can pick up, I mean, fluvial stratum. One of these big 17-pound bags, I can do 4 of these tanks with. So you be the judge of which one is more cost effective as far as substrate and rock, but I think it's freshwater. Now next up we have lights, which, and we already know the answer to this. So obviously with saltwater, we have coral. We have coral over here, which are photosensitive. So you have to have specialty lighting. Oops, sorry, people are messaging in. We have to have specialty lighting to help the coral grow, which we do have to have the same case with freshwater. But with freshwater, so for example, each one of these lights is about $400. It does half of my tank, and I have 4 of them. So then you come over here. Yes, if you want to go crazy with specialty lighting, you 100% can. And I can show you that here. So with freshwater, this is a fluvial planted light. We use this for our CO2 tank. It does an amazing job. As you can see, the plants are thriving. They're doing good. Yes, you can spend the money on a specialty light. And if you have specialty plants, I 100% believe that you should buy a specialty light for those plants. Now, saltwater, like I said, if you have coral or photosynthesis, man, I'm not saying that word right. Fish that are sensitive to light or need the light, you're going to spend a lot of money. Now, look over here. We have 2 10-gallon tanks. That is a shop light. That is over the top of them. They are doing absolutely amazing growing. And that's actually what we have above all of our freshwater tanks. Now, there is a trick to freshwater lighting. And if you are going to use a shop light, I recommend, if you are going to pick up a shop light, that it needs at least 5,000 lums or stronger to be able to allow your plants to grow. Anything below that, it's got this weird yellow haze. We've done it before and it just doesn't look right. So as far as costliness of freshwater or saltwater, again, freshwater's got it, because if you buy a shop light for your planted tank or just for your fish tank, you're spending what, 30, 60 bucks? I have $250. $250 in this one light. One light. So obviously it's going to be more cost effective for freshwater. Now, let's move on to fish. People always say that saltwater is better because of how pretty the fish are. And I will not disagree one bit. They are absolutely stunning. I mean, look at the clownfish. I had a gentleman come in the other day. This is an Osceolarius clown. And he said, I don't have a saltwater tank, but my daughter wants a clownfish, so can you set me up with something that's pretty, just like a clownfish, but freshwater? And we ended up setting him up with a blue rainbow fish, which is absolutely stunning. It's not orange, obviously, but it's still very pretty fish. You will always have prettier fish in the ocean. I mean, you have gobies, you have wrasse, you have clownfish, you have peppermint shrimp. Over here you have the engineer goby. We have the marine betas. This was the first time I had ever seen marine betas. Didn't even know they were a thing. So you will always have prettier fish than freshwater. But I'm not saying that you can't have really amazing freshwater fish. Look at these. Those are absolutely gorgeous. The sunset grammies, absolutely beautiful fish. You have, oh, where are you at? Freshwater giant betas, gorgeous. So it depends on, and these are those blue rainbow fish I was telling you about. So it really depends on your personal preference. Do you want to spend the money? Because in order to get pretty fish, you have to have salt water like this. But you're spending $300 on a fish in saltwater versus $30 on a freshwater tank. But I will say, in comparison, which one is better? I will definitely say that I always like saltwater fish better. I think they have the overall more beauty with them. So I will say that saltwater wins this round just on overall beauty of their fish. So we are tied 1-1. Next up is overall look. Now look just is going to come down to how you want it to look. I may go into someone's house and go, man, that's just not my vibe. That's not how I would have done it. But guess what? It's not my tank. These are my tanks. And obviously we're in a retail store, so we have to keep them minimal. But you can have GSP, Green Star Polyp, you can have Zoas. You could have this whole thing rock with just coral all over it, and it'd be absolutely gorgeous. It all depends on how you want it to look. Now, again, if you want on the freshwater side, if you want a jungle theme, then have some jungle val. If you want a minimalistic tank like this one, that's okay too. That's still beautiful. If you want a tank with angels or a ton of guppies, guess what? That is okay. These guys are still my favorite. These are blue snakeskin guppies. Still my favorite guppy. It all comes down to how you want it to look. Now, when it comes down to it, I like freshwater better than I do saltwater. Just because the overall maintenance on a freshwater is far easier than it is on a saltwater tank. I don't have to measure out how much salt to put in or check the salinity levels. I just have to make sure that the water that we have is treated, and that's it. We have to make sure, obviously we use RO water or reverse osmosis. So we do use replenish when the total waste of the TDS gets low. So there is that a little bit of tweaking, but it's nothing compared to what you have to do for a saltwater tank. We have skimmers, we have socks, we have all that. We have circulation pumps just to make sure that there's the right amount of current on the corals. We have to make sure to place them in certain spots to make sure that they're happy. Anemones, obviously, well, anemones do their own thing. Everything has to go in a certain spot when it comes to saltwater. And that's one thing I don't like about saltwater. Don't get me wrong. When I go to the zoo, I absolutely love walking in and seeing that big, beautiful reef. I do. I think fully set up reefs where they're all grown in with all the coral is just absolutely beautiful, hands down. But when it comes to being able to set it up how you want to, you're kind of limited when it comes to saltwater because of all of the different things with the coral. Now, if you do just a rock setup and you have an eel or a shark or whatever, then you do you. You can set it up exactly how you want to an extent. Sharks do need racetrack tanks. But if you have live coral, they have to go in certain spots. They have to be set up a certain way. And I think that really restricts people as far as their creativity on how they want a tank to look. Now, when they fill in, I'm sure they look absolutely stunning. But as we all know, coral takes years to grow and fill in a tank. It isn't, I mean, unless you want to drop a ton of money and you do you. If you got the money to fill in an entire reef tank and get it established, absolutely, you do you. But most people don't have that kind of disposable income. I think that freshwater tanks are more forgiving. They allow you to set them up how you want. But freshwater still has restrictions. There's certain plants that like certain more light or certain shady areas. Just like when you buy plants or trees for outside, they have guidelines on them. Hey, this thing needs more sunlight. This thing needs more shade. It's the same with freshwater plants. Some of them like more light, some of them don't. But the awesome thing about freshwater is that you can come in and scape it however you want. The fish, obviously, depending on what kind of fish you want to put in, is going to dictate on, like, do I need to do a bunch of hides for my cichlids, or do I need a big open area for my guppies to swim through, or do I need lots of space for my giant danios to move around? So these are things that you do have to keep in mind. But in my opinion, freshwater is going to win because you have more of a decision on how you want that tank to look. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Leave me a comment down below if you think that I'm wrong and saltwater is the way to go with it. And yeah, by all means. Last but not least, now freshwater is one up. So last but not least, we'll see who gets this, is cost. We've kind of touched base on it a little bit here and there between freshwater and saltwater. But it comes down to cost. Let's take, for example, how much it would cost to set up a 75-gallon freshwater versus a saltwater. Now, for a saltwater tank, obviously, we know that there is a lot of money that's going to go into it. We know that we have to get live gravel, we have to get live rock or artificial rock. We have to get, if we do coral, well, then that's an extra expense. We have to get salt water or mix it ourselves, at which point we are mixing salt to put in our tanks. We got to make sure that the flow valves are right. We have to make sure, depending on if we have eels, got to make sure that we have lids or sealed lids so that an eel, octopus, jumping fish can't get out. Then, of course, we have lighting, the expensive part. Obviously, if you have a 75-gallon tank, then you need it drilled. You need the plumbing. You need the sump. There is so much money that people don't see when they look at tanks. I get it. You know, we all get excited when it comes to our saltwater tanks. We want them to look the best, and we want them set up now. But for one of these tanks to be set up, costs about $2,000. Truth be told. That's without coral. That's without livestock. That is for the sump, the socks. I know I'm pointing down here, but it's actually hidden behind. I just don't want to crawl back there. But we have the socks. We have the sump. We have the skimmer. We have the return pump. We have the plumbing. We have the lids. We have the tank. We have the lights. We have the live gravel. We have the rock. You're looking at least $2,000 in a setup like this. So it's not something that a lot of people can just jump into. A lot of people, when I first set up my first saltwater tank, I got the tank. Then my next paycheck, I went and got it drilled. Now I drill them myself, but then I went and got a sump. Then I went and got lighting and then gravel. So it wasn't like an all-in-one thing. It was lots of different steps in order to get my saltwater up and running. So let's say $2,000 to $3,000 to set up a 75-gallon saltwater. Now let's jump over to, let's see, the closest thing I have to, and we'll give it a benefit of the doubt because this is actually a CO2 tank. So this one actually costs a little bit more. So let's pretend that this 40 gallon is a 75. Let's look at the money that it would take to get it. Obviously, we have the tank. Now, the saltwater tank that we have over there is an Aqualand. This one, I believe, is a Marine Land rimless. So this tank is immediately going to cost more money. Obviously, it came with a stand, but we're not going to count the stand because we didn't count the stand in the other one. Next, we have light. Then we have decor. We have gravel. We're not even going to count the CO2. But if you guys want, we could actually do a video on CO2. But anyway, that's it. Yes, if this was a 75, we'd have it drilled. We'd have the sump. We wouldn't have a skimmer, but we would still have the socks. We would still have the return pump just like we do in this tank. We have the socks. We have the return pump. We have the media. So when it comes to the sumps, we'll just call it a wash. When it comes to the cost of the tanks, we'll call it a wash. What it comes down to, price difference between the two, is lighting and decor. Obviously, lighting, this one's going to win because this light is about $250. Well, this light's about $200 versus the other ones we got at about $250. So it's close. So we'll call that a wash. But then it comes down to the gravel, the decor. Now gravel in here, this was actually a big bag that was used across many different tanks, but this gravel was like 15 bucks. Saltwater gravel can be upwards of 30. Then you have decor. Okay, well, that's no different. In a saltwater tank, you would have decor, you would have rocks, you would have all that. So let's call it a wash again. And we break it down to the final component. Freshwater versus saltwater. Freshwater is very easy for us to get. It's in our tap as long as we treat it with prime or different treating agents. Saltwater isn't so easy. Saltwater, you need to either go to a store that already has it made, bring in your jugs, spend the extra gas money. I mean, if you have a 75-gallon tank, you're making a lot of trips to fill up that tank, not counting the sump too. Then you have, let's say that you're like, no, I'm not going to go get saltwater. I'm going to make it myself. Well, then guess what? You have a vat. You have a circulation pump in that vat. Then you have to buy the salt. Then you have to mix it. Then you have to buy salinity testers. Then you have to buy everything so much more expensive. Saltwater. So with that, breaking it down that way, that's where freshwater is going to win. Freshwater, as much as we love saltwater, freshwater is just easier. Yes, you may not have as vibrant of fish as saltwater does, but you can still have an absolutely gorgeous tank and it not cost you nearly as much as a saltwater tank. So, with that being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel. And let us know down in the comments what your guys' thoughts are. Do you guys think that freshwater is better? Do you think saltwater is better? Do you think we got it right, or do you think that I'm completely off base? Please let us know in the comments down below. Also, we now started shipping reptiles on Morph Market. We have them attached to our website, and then we also started shipping dry goods, which are also, and those are going through eBay, but those will be attached very shortly to our website as well. Thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, the big question: your tank or mine?